Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I am the Lord that healeth thee. I am the Lord that healeth thee. I am the Lord that healeth thee. In thee, O Lord, I put my trust. In thee, O Lord, I put my trust. In thee, O Lord, I put my trust. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God.
Good evening on this Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent 2021. I thought that I would speak to you about a picture this evening. I would say painting, it's actually not a painting, it's a very, very large photograph. It is called Quarantania, and it's by an artist called Tacita Dean. She's a contemporary artist, she's still producing work now. And a couple of years ago, in 2018 I think it was, she had 3 large shows in different places across London. And the piece that I'm going to talk to you about this evening was on display at the Royal Academy. And I remember being particularly struck by it there. And it seems like a very relevant piece for us to think about together today, because it relates to the story that is the basis for Lent. Now I wonder what you think the word quarantania might mean. It sounds a lot like quarantine, doesn't it? It sounds a lot like some of the things that maybe we hear a lot about at the moment. The word quarantine has never been used as much in the news, I don't think, as it has been in the last year. Quarantania, actually, whilst it is the root of the word for quarantine, originally means 40. Une quarantaine in French is 40 of something, around about 40. And we've heard a lot about numbers in the Bible in our morning and evening services recently in various ways. They seem to keep popping up. Well, here's another number that pops up rather a lot in the Bible. 40 days. 40 days of Noah on the ark. 40 years of the Israelites wandering around in the desert before they reached the promised land. And of course, 40 days of Jesus being taken out into the wilderness. Matthew chapter 4 tells us that Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. What an understatement. He would have been incredibly hungry after 40 days and 40 nights. And the devil, of course, comes to him and tempts him in 3 different ways. And if you would like to read that narrative, you can do so in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 to 11. Jesus, of course, manages to say no to the devil 3 times over. No, I'm not going to turn these stones into bread. Man lives not by bread alone, but by the words of God. No, I am not going to perform a magic trick and jump off the temple in order to become a celebrity. And no, I am not going to turn my back on God and bow down to you, because the nations that you are offering to give me are not your kingdom to give anyway. 40 days, a quarantania spent in the desert. And the name Quarantania is also the name of the Mount of Temptation that you can go and visit even now between Jerusalem and Jericho, in the wilderness there. I've been there. I went when a group of us went from St. Mark's a couple of years ago to Israel, a year and a half ago to Israel. We went up the Mount of Temptation. And if you go up there now, you will find that there is a monastery near the top. Now in the picture that I'm showing you this evening by Tacitus Dean, there is no trace of that monastery, and that is because this very large format picture that she has made is based on an old photograph of the Mount of Temptation, a tourist photograph taken before that monastery was built. And so what we have is an old photograph that she has found about a decade before making this piece of art, and she has blown it up really large, and it's quite a good quality old photograph because it's not pixelated in the way that digital photographs are today, so it sort of bears blowing up. She has separated that out into 7 panels. Each of those panels is about 1 metre across, so that gives you a sense of the scale, and then she has annotated it and she's added some colour. And the whole effect of this is incredibly interesting, I think. For one thing, it becomes quite hallucinogenic, and that's intentional on her part. She speaks about making this look as though it is the way that Jesus may have seen the Mount of Temptation after 40 days without food, when he may have been hallucinating slightly. And it gives us this sort of sense of a landscape that is almost real and almost not, which is very interesting, because actually when you go to a place or when you look through a Bible guide and you see photographs of the real place that relates to a narrative, what we're often looking for is a sense of reality and proof, evidence that these places are real. The places where these narratives took place are not a figment of anyone's imagination. And that much is true, but she leaves the sort of hallucinogenic thought process going around that up to our imaginations. And that's quite an interesting and clever thing to do, I think, as I will elaborate on. She also, as I say, she puts marks around this in handwriting, chalk marks. Now, chalk is the kind of material that you can easily rub out, isn't it? Chalk is something you use to write on a blackboard at school. It's something that you might use to educate people, to tell them what to think, to tell them what the facts are about something, to do your mathematical sum on a chalkboard. But she uses it here in this sort of freehand way, and she even occasionally rubs it out. You can see little areas where there is some chalk dust on the surface of these large-scale photographs. And I think these are thoughts which are constantly being rethought in a way. I don't know how well you can read them because it's hard to blow this up large enough on the screen that I'm using to show this to you. But you can see words there like place of temptation. So that's a statement of fact. This is where Jesus was tempted. Satan's step. There's something sort of poetic and descriptive. Judean desert, again a marker of geographical place. Where are you, JC? Question mark. Alone? Question mark. Where is Jesus in this landscape? Well, don't be ridiculous. It's a photograph that was taken a long time after the 1st century when Jesus was in that desert. But there's something sort of existential about that question, isn't there? Where are you amidst our temptations, Jesus? Where are you in this picture? And are you alone? Are we looking at this at a moment when you're on your own? Or are we looking at this at a moment when the devil is with you? At what point in those 40 days are we? Amongst the stones, she writes 40 days and 40 nights. And then further up again into the sky, petromorphic scape, so referencing the stones, petra meaning stone. Bread or satisfaction is another question that comes up in that annotation. I think this is all very telling because these are thoughts. They're things that she has put down on the surface of the picture as she has considered the landscape and the narrative that seems to go with that. It's hard to look at that place now without relating it to a narrative. But what does that mean? She asks in a way. So what? The place exists, but so what? What do we do about that? Yes, this was a real place. We can apply it to the narrative of the Bible, but what do we do to respond to that? And I wonder what you would write down around the edge of Mount Quarantania if you were going to write down some annotations and some questions. I think it's interesting that she marks 40 days and 40 nights. Where are you, JC? We don't know where we are in that period of 40 days and nights. She separates the panels out as though they're almost marking the days of a week, 7 days in a week, marking those off perhaps almost like a tally. There's something slightly filmic about this. Tessa Tadine is also very interested in the process of making moving pictures, film. An old-fashioned Kodak film was a medium that was very dear to her. She's not a big fan of digital media, and often her works will critique those. So there's something slightly nostalgic about the way that she approaches art very often, and the medium of art. But she's sort of questioning here the medium through which we come to understand the Bible very often. We look at it and we say, is it true? And she's inviting us, I think, really to go a little bit further and to respond to that. What questions do we put down? How are we changed as a result of reading this narrative? Now, it strikes me that 40 days and nights, 40 years are significant numbers in the Bible. But of course, 40 weeks is also the gestation period of a human baby. It's the period that it takes to grow a person, after which a new person is birthed into the world. And maybe this Lent, we can think about the ways in which we're going to allow the biblical narratives that we might be so familiar with to change us as we mark off those weeks within the next 6 weeks of Lent, as we mark off one day at a time. What questions do we have to put to Jesus? What thoughts do we have to go alongside the reality of our daily lives? How do we engage with the Bible narratives that we might be reading over the next 40 days? And how will we come out the other end changed? Will we be reborn? Born again Christians is a phrase that we are very familiar with, isn't it? But the notion of rebirth, of constantly becoming a new creation in Jesus and allowing him to let us walk alongside him through the wilderness and out the other side, might be quite helpful thoughts for us as we approach this Lent. So I'd encourage you to have a good look at that picture, see if there are any other annotations that you can pick out that I haven't mentioned. They might be rather small to see, but just think to yourself, well, how would you annotate certain other Bible passages, whether you have a picture or not? What are the questions that you would ask in your mind, and how might that passage change you? Amen.